What is going on, guys? I've got something different for you today. This is going to be kind of a informational video, almost like just my opinion on something, on an issue. Not necessarily an issue, but something that you guys might run into as you get into motorcycles. And the topic of today's video is going to be, should you buy a new bike or a used bike? So I'll start getting into it here in just a second. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about on a new motorcycle is the technology. Obviously, as motorcycles get newer and newer every year, they're going to put more technology into them. And I think personally that's awesome. A lot of this stuff is really cool. Like, for example, on this bike I have this beautiful TFT display here. Gives me a bunch of information, nice and clear, and it looks cool. Ooh, it sounds so good. Another piece of technology that this bike has that I actually just used because I went across some brick here as I was hitting my rear brake. ABS. ABS is pretty much standard on just about every new motorcycle. I think that's a good piece of technology to have. Obviously for safety reasons. Some people might want to turn it off if you're doing like wheelies or stunts or track days even, but I think it's a good option to have. Another thing that's really cool about the technology on this bike in particular, and really a lot of other ones, is this bike has a quick shifter, which, if you're unaware of what a quick shifter is, it basically allows you to shift without pulling in the clutch every time. So get going here and I'll show you that real quick because it's pretty cool. And you can downshift too. Really nice, really good feature. That's becoming kind of a standard for new motorcycles to have a quick shifter. So that's another piece of technology that's good to have. Another thing I wanted to talk about is rider modes. This motorcycle has, I think, four power modes and then 2 traction control modes. And then you could obviously do manual overrides and stuff, but it has those factory presets. I think they're super nice. So the power modes are nice because if you're just kind of like starting out on the bike, or you just say I just bought this bike, I could turn it down to a lower power mode until I kind of get a feel for it, get used to it, and then I could turn it up. It's nice, like at this point I ride with it in the most aggressive modes, but it's nice to have that ability. Also, like, a lot of people say the weakest power mode is like a rain mode, and I have used that before because, you know, it's kind of inevitable that on a motorcycle you're gonna get stuck in the rain sometime, and so I have had to use that before. It's definitely nice to be able to turn the power down so I'm not spinning on the wet road and stuff. So talking about technology kind of leads me into the next thing I wanted to talk about, and that's going to be safety. I already mentioned that this bike has ABS and rider modes, traction control. That's something that is pretty standard on new motorcycles, and it just helps make them a little bit safer. So that's another pro for buying a new bike. Next thing I was going to talk about is reliability. Obviously, if you go to the dealership and buy a brand new motorcycle like this, it's going to be reliable. And even if it's not, brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, factory warranty. If you buy a new bike, they're going to have a factory warranty. So if anything goes wrong on it, that I guess they determine is a flaw from like manufacturing, they're going to fix it for free, which is nice. It's good peace of mind, just knowing that you're not on your own if something happens. And that also kind of ties into the next thing that I was going to talk about, which is when you buy a new motorcycle, you know the history of it, because it doesn't have any. It came straight off the dealership floor. The only history is really it's like shipping to get to the dealership. You're the first owner. You don't have to worry about if the guy before you beat the crap out of it or dropped it, or if there's some hidden issue that he basically like duct taped together and is just kind of hoping that it lasts until he gets rid of it. So I think that's another pro for buying a new motorcycle. Alright guys, so we talked about some of the pros of buying a new motorcycle. Now let's talk about a couple of the cons. First one that's obvious is the price. Everyone knows if you go to a dealership, you're going to end up paying way more. They're going to add a bunch of fees and stuff, and you're just going to pay more. I think this motorcycle in particular, I believe when I bought it, I want to say the MSRP was about $9,500. By the time you get out of there with all the fees and tax and whatnot, this thing was well over 10 grand. So you're not getting a bike for the, I guess, listed price technically. You're going to pay more. Additionally, for aftermarket stuff, you're going to pay a lot more because it's a new bike. Not a bunch of companies have started making aftermarket parts for it yet. So the ones that are making them are going to charge more because, you know, basic economics, supply and demand. That kind of leads me into the next thing too, is actually the availability of aftermarket parts. If you want to get a motorcycle and immediately start doing like exhaust, integrated tail light, stuff like that, you're not going to be able to if you buy a brand new bike. Well, let me back up there a second. Assuming that it's a first gen, this bike is a 2021 model. So I experienced this when I bought this bike. This was the first of the new, forget if it's the third or fourth generation MT-09. But anyways, they changed a bunch of stuff up and there weren't parts available for it when it first came out. Like, for example, the exhaust. I think there were like maybe 2 companies that were making exhausts. One of them was Akrapovic or Akrapovic, however you want to pronounce that. I have no idea. But they were one of them, and the other one was a Polish company, Dominator, which is actually the one that I ended up going with because full system was pretty cheap, and honestly it sounds pretty good in my opinion. Hopefully you agree. But the other thing that I dealt with this bike was the integrated tail light with the turn signals. That's like one of the first things that everybody does to their motorcycle when they buy it, is they take off that stupid what's it called, like the fender in the rear that holds your license plate and stuff. Those things are just so ugly. I wish they would stop putting them on bikes, but I know it's required by law. But to get the fender eliminator kit and the tail light, it was like, I think it was almost a year after I bought this that TST Industries finally came out with one. So I kind of had to rock the stock one for a while, which, I mean, whatever. It looked cool, but it's nice having the aftermarket. Speaking of limited availability, another important thing to note is the availability of content. I'm talking like tutorial YouTube videos for maintenance and stuff, and like parts installation. Like a lot of the parts I bought for this bike that I wanted to install, I had to literally figure it out myself, because it takes time for people to get their hands on these and do the upgrades. And then again, not everyone who does it is going to make a video on it. I know I've done stuff to bikes before and I haven't made a video of it, so I'm sure there's plenty of other people that are the same way. So if you're wanting to wrench on a bike yourself, a new bike might not be the best option just because of that reason. If you don't know exactly what you're doing, there might not be anyone to help you unless you take it to a dealership. Alright, so the last thing I want to try to talk about here quick before I get on the highway and you guys can't hear me anymore is that when you buy a new motorcycle, you might have a tendency to want to like baby it a little bit. Just because it's new. Obviously you still want to baby it at first to do the proper break-in period on it. But I'm talking like after the break-in, it's new, it was expensive. You're not going to want to be ripping on it, and I mean, maybe you do, but me personally, when I bought this thing and it was still very new to me, I really didn't want to beat the crap out of it. I took super good care of it, which, you know, call it a good thing or a bad thing. I guess it depends on your how you feel, but that's another important point. Okay, I'm back off the highway now. Check my notes again to make sure I'm talking about the right stuff. And basically where I left off, we kind of covered the pros and cons of the new bike. Now we're going to get into the pros and cons of buying a used motorcycle. Number one pro to buying a used motorcycle is obviously the opposite of a new one. It's going to be the cost. A used motorcycle is going to be a lot cheaper than a new one. You're not going to have any dealership fees or anything like that, so it's going to save you some money. Additionally, parts for the motorcycle are going to be cheaper because there's going to be a lot of manufacturers out there competing, making parts, and you're going to get a better deal on them. Also, I hate to say it, but once like the Chinese cloners, I guess you could call them, that basically rip off the original parts, once they start making stuff, it really drives the price of the actual like real first, you know, patented parts down, because people see that they could be made for cheaper, and why would they pay more for it? So if you plan on getting a bike and you want to immediately have just tons of mods available that you can do to it for a relatively cheap price, a used bike might be the bike for you. And you know, similar to the new bike, I talked about having maintenance videos and stuff available. Well, on a used bike that's been out for a couple of years, you're going to have a lot more of those videos. So if you're the kind of guy who likes to work on his own stuff and tinker and whatnot, a used bike might be good for you because you're going to have that support if you need it. Another pro to buying a used bike is that you can beat on it and not feel bad about it. Obviously, you know, if you pay less for something, you're not going to care as much because obviously you didn't spend your money and your time on it. So if you're looking for something that you could get and just kind of beat on without really caring, again, used bike might be good for you. Another thing too, if you're kind of new and you don't know, you're not sure if you're going to keep it for a while. I made this mistake when I bought my first bike. I bought a brand new MT-07 and then I kind of wanted to upgrade. So, I mean, ultimately it worked out fine, but it just cost me more money because I had to buy 2 new bikes from the dealership. So if you're kind of unsure about if you want to keep, say, like a middleweight bike or something, I would go used, just for that reason, because then you're gonna have to buy 2 new bikes. Don't make the same mistake that I did. So this next one can be a pro or a con depending on who you ask. I talked about this bike having a bunch of technology. Well, if you get an older used bike, it's not going to have some of that technology. So we'll talk about why it could be a pro. I know a lot of guys, they don't like all the like rider aids and traction control and modes and stuff. It just makes the bike more complicated than it needs to be. All you really need is a motor and 2 wheels, and you'll have a great time. So there's people who might argue that not having that stuff is better, but that's up to your interpretation, your opinion, whatever you like. But I'm going to put that in the pros category for a used bike. I'm almost to my destination and I still have some stuff to talk about, so we'll try to cover this quick. Cons of buying a used bike. I kind of just mentioned one of the pros being that it has limited technology. Depending on where you stand with that, that could also be argued as a con. You're not going to have some of the, like, for example, safety features and stuff that you would on a newer motorcycle, like the ABS, rider modes, etc. So we'll put that also in the con category. That one's kind of up to you to decide on. So the next con about buying a used motorcycle is that you don't know the history of it. The guy before you could have absolutely beat the crap out of the bike, and he's just now holding it together basically with duct tape and zip ties, hoping that some sucker buys it before it becomes his problem. And unfortunately, as much as I'd love to believe that people don't do that, realistically, it happens all the time. It's happened to me before. I've bought people's crap that they told me was good, and it sucks. Then you're stuck with it. You can't take it back to the dealership and have a factory warranty to get it fixed. It's your problem, and that definitely sucks. Next thing I want to talk about, kind of related to the last point, but reliability. Again, you don't know the history of the bike. It might have a lot of miles, and it could fail at any point. I mean, same thing with cars. There's a reason why we like to buy cars with lower miles, because it's a little bit more predictable. You know, you would hope that something newer with fewer miles on it is going to be more reliable than something that's basically at the end of its life. And that's the sad reality of this kind of stuff. Like, everything has a life expectancy, motorcycles included. So the next thing is going to be somebody who likes having technology in a motorcycle. Obviously, these newer bikes have more technology. You could still get used ones that have a decent amount, but I mean, obviously, the newer you go, same thing like with cars. The newer, the more technology. It is what it is. And the last person that I think a new motorcycle would be best for is someone who plans on keeping it for a while. I kind of mentioned, I think with the used bike, that it might make more sense to go that route if you don't plan on keeping it for a super long time, because then, just like I did, I had to pay a lot more money to have 2 new motorcycles. So I would definitely, you know, if you've kind of rode some things and you kind of know what you want, and say you want to keep a bike for a while, a new bike might be for you because it's gonna last. If you made it this far in the video, I love you, appreciate you watching. Consider subscribing if you like this. I'm gonna try to do more interesting videos and stuff, but I guess I will catch you guys on the next one. Again, appreciate it. See you later.